Zone with legendary Republican strategist and political icon and pundit Roger Stone. Stone has served as a senior campaign aide to 3 Republican presidents. He is a New York Times best-selling author and a longtime friend and advisor of President Donald Trump. As an outspoken libertarian, Stone has appeared on thousands of broadcasts, spoken at countless venues, and lectured before the prestigious Oxford Political Union and the Cambridge Union Society. Due to his 4+ decades in the political and cultural arena, Stone has become a pop culture icon. And now, here's your host, Roger Stone.
Great. Welcome. I'm Roger Stone, and yes, you are back in the Stone Zone. We're still celebrating President Donald Trump's tumultuous tsunami-like victory here at the Stone Zone. But even as we celebrate, there's a fight brewing in the U.S. Senate. As you know, Mitch the Turtle McConnell has announced that he is stepping down as the Senate Majority Leader, and there's a 3-way fight between Senator John Cornyn from Texas, Senator Thune from Nebraska, and of course my own U.S. Senator Rick Scott. Now this is a vitally important position because one of the ways that the deep state and the Democrats hamstrung the Trump administration in 2016, or really 2017, was by holding up President Trump's appointments. The president has announced his intention to utilize recess appointments. These are essentially appointments that the president is allowed to make when the Senate is not in session, and they can begin their work. This, of course, will require the acquiescence and the leadership of the Senate Majority Leader. Now, John Cornyn is a rather curious choice for Republican leader. When Lisa Monaco, who was the chief of staff at the FBI under Robert Mueller, was appointed to the number 2 position in the Department of Justice, even though it has been established by Special Counsel John Durham's report that Monaco was one of the co-conspirators in the illegal and illicit Russian collusion hoax. Well, Cornyn praised her nomination. Only 2 senators voted against it. Those would be Ted Cruz of Texas and Rand Paul of Kentucky. Cornyn is not much of a Republican, certainly not much of a Trump supporter. And then there's John Thune. Senator Thune actually proposed when the grab them by the you-know-what tape dropped at the end of the 2016 campaign, that Donald Trump be forced out of the race by the Republican National Committee and be replaced by his running mate. Geez, I can't remember that guy's name. What was it? Oh, pardon me. The vice president who destroyed his career. That would be the guy who flushed his entire career. I'm strongly supporting Rick Scott for a number of reasons. First of all, Rick Scott came not from politics, but from the world of business, very much like Donald Trump. Now, I've disagreed with Senator Scott on a few issues. Red flag laws come to mind, but by and large, he's been a solid conservative. He was an excellent governor, far better than the governor we have now, and he's been an excellent U.S. senator, and he had the courage to endorse Donald Trump prior to his nomination, but over the candidacy of his own state governor, Governor Ron DeSantis. Rick Scott is a good man who has my strong support, not that I have a vote, but the Senate is going to make this decision, I believe it is tomorrow, in a secret ballot. See, the difference between, this will be in the Republican caucus. You see, the difference between a caucus and a cactus, well, in the case of a cactus, all the pricks are on the outside. Here to help me break this and other political news down is my co-host, Troy Smith, the editor-in-chief of slingshot.news, who joins me now in the Stone Zone.
Roger, it's an honor to be back with you in the Stone Zone as always. There's a pressing question on my mind that I want to ask you right away. You mentioned Rick Scott. You mentioned some of what's going on in Florida, and we do have news that Marco Rubio was nominated as the Secretary of State yesterday by President Donald Trump. We have a headline there. We also have a picture of Marco and the president, and this will, Roger, leave a vacancy in the U.S. Senate in Florida, which is a crucial state. And to my knowledge, it will be Governor Ron DeSantis who actually will be in charge of appointing Marco Rubio's replacement. Now, this could be a conflict of interest, considering that DeSantis challenged Trump in 2024. I want to hear your thoughts. What is the situation? What should we look for in this situation with Marco Rubio heading to the White House?
Well, it's an excellent question. Look, Marco Rubio was not my personal first choice for this job, but I'm very happy with his appointment. He's been particularly hardline in terms of communism within our own hemisphere when it comes to Venezuela and Cuba. But more importantly, Marco Rubio understands that this is the Trump administration and that his job as Secretary of State will be to carry out the America First policies of Donald Trump. So as I say, I have an excellent personal relationship. I also must tell you, he's been very good to my family. When my wife was diagnosed with cancer, he was very, very helpful to us. And therefore, you'll never find me saying anything negative about him. I think he's a good man. Of course, my wife and he are both Cuban, so she loves him. What's more important here is the question that you raise, and that is, what will Governor DeSantis do with this vacancy? Now, Governor DeSantis has had numerous opportunities to repair his relationship with MAGA world. To my knowledge, he never appeared at a Trump rally anyplace in the country. Trump was gracious enough to allow him to speak to the Republican National Convention, but he could have shown up at the big rally in Doral, but he wasn't there. I think that was a missed opportunity. What he could do, and I'm not saying he's going to do, but what he could do is to step down as governor, have the non-entity who's our current lieutenant governor, who you'll have trouble picturing in your mind, become governor, and then appoint DeSantis himself to the U.S. Senate seat. Historically, there is a history of this not going over well with voters, and governors who have done that have found themselves defeated in the next election cycle in which they had to stand for election. I would hope that Governor DeSantis will appoint somebody like Byron Donalds, who'd be an excellent United States Senator, or I can think of a number of other individuals here in the Sunshine State, but I can't tell you whether there have been any private conversations between President Trump and Governor DeSantis. I don't know. Here's one good piece of news. There's one person who won't be voting in the Republican caucus, and that's Larry Hogan. Larry Hogan ignominiously defeated in the state of Maryland. I think I may have told you the other day, somebody gave me a coffee cup that said Trump, Vance, Hogan. And I said, oh my God, I can't believe you have a cup celebrating or advocating for the election of Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and Larry Hogan. I said, no. This was Trump, Vance, Hulk Hogan. I like that combination much, much better. We are, let's see, are we ready with our video? I have a very special video that I'm not quite. All right, let us continue the discussion. You'll let me know when that's ready. We are in a situation in which I think that the Senate is going to make a vital decision here that is crucial to the success of the president's administration. And I hope, first of all, I think it's cowardly to have a secret ballot. But secondarily, I hope enough senators will realize that the most Trump-friendly candidate here is former Governor, U.S. Senator Rick Scott. The other thing that I find very encouraging, of course, is President Trump's appointment of Tom Homan as the let's call it the immigration czar. I know and really like Tom Homan. He is a no-nonsense guy who always tells you the truth. He did a great job as the director of ICE. Now the president has given him even broader responsibilities, where he will be in charge of the mass deportation of many of the illegals who are in this country. Now, I believe that he has advocated focusing first on those who are in the country illegally who have prior criminal records, either in this country or in their own country. For those who say this cannot be done, well, that's wrong. President Dwight Eisenhower departed 1.3 million illegals during his tenure. If there is any man who can do this job, it is Tom Homan. So a giant vote of confidence for Tom Homan. This is, I think, among the president's best appointments so far.
Well, and Roger, we had news today that North Dakota Governor Kristi Noem has been nominated as the Homeland Security Secretary. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. She seemed to be in the VP discussion, and then once the dog controversy kind of embroiled her, it was game over for that. But she seems to have made it her way to the cabinet. What's your thoughts on the pick?
Well, first of all, she is, without any question, loyal to President Trump and his agenda. I apologize for the Stone dog chorus there. They're obviously not happy with her appointment, but I take a somewhat different view. We certainly have the best looking Homeland Security Secretary in our history. Look, she's been loyal to the president. I think she will do a good job. One question I do want to address, and this is very important. There's been some controversy regarding Steve Bessent. Steve Bessent emerged as a top economic advisor to President Donald Trump in the closing days of the campaign, has supported him since 2016. He is a really articulate advocate for Trump's plan to grow us out of the economic doldrums we find ourselves under under Joe Biden. He is an outspoken advocate for cryptocurrency, particularly Bitcoin. I interviewed him at 77 WABC last Sunday. Now, it is true that Scott Bessent, earlier in his business career, worked for George Soros. He worked for Soros on the business side, where he was in charge of making money for George Soros, and he did a very good job of that. But he never agreed with Soros's political views. He never worked for any of his political entities. I thought it was really important that Scott Bessent have an opportunity to address that himself. So I had him on my radio show, The Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC Radio, just this past weekend, and I put the question to him about George Soros. I also asked him about his broader views on the economy. I think he's absolutely the right man for the job. We have a little video here, and more importantly, an audio for you. Let's let Scott Bessent speak for himself.
We are pleased now to be joined by Scott Bessent. Scott Bessent is an American investor, philanthropist, and educator. More importantly, he is a key economic advisor to President Donald Trump. He is widely seen, according to Reuters and the Associated Press, as a top candidate for Secretary of the Treasury. He's a longtime hedge fund investor who taught at Yale University for several years. I spoke to the president about him when the president brought up his name last Friday night at dinner at Mar-a-Lago. I know the president has the highest possible regard for Scott Bessent. Reading here from Reuters, they say, while Bessent has long favored a laissez-faire policies that were popular in the pre-Trump Republican Party, he has also spoken highly of Trump's use of tariffs as a negotiating tool. He has praised the president-elect's economic philosophy, which rests on a skepticism of both regulations and international trade. It's a great honor for us. Scott Bessent, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Roger, great to be with you.
So let's kind of start with the priorities here. Associated Press and Reuters have both reported that you are one of, I guess, several people being considered for the position of Treasury Secretary. I think you would be excellent in that position. When the president raised your name, when I spoke to him last Friday night, I didn't raise your name, he rose your name. I can tell you he has the highest possible regard for you. But what do you think his and the country's top immediate priorities should be?
Well, I'll stay in my lane on the economy, and I think we're going to come out of the gates fast. That we've got to extend or make permanent the Trump tax cuts. I think we've got to reassert American energy dominance and get rid of these failed green policies. I think we've got to adjust the budget deficit. We're running a 7% deficit to GDP, and I've talked to President Trump about getting that down. And we've got to address the affordability crisis that's hitting the millions of Americans. And, to me, I call it, we've got to reprivatize the economy. The Biden economy has been a return to central planning that failed in the 60s and 70s. It gave us a great inflation, and gave us a great inflation again. What Thomas Sowell calls the vision of the elites has failed the American people, and Donald Trump has come to the rescue.
I thank you for joining us. We're talking to Scott Bessent, who serves as an economic advisor to President Donald Trump. He was out there on the plane in those final weeks of the campaign, turned out to be indispensable as an asset for the president, a man who I've gotten to know recently, but for whom I have enormous respect. He's a fellow supply-sider, I guess you could say, someone who understands that economic growth and a rising tide lifts all boats.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show. Here's Roger Stone.
I'm Roger Stone. We're back on the Roger Stone Show. We're talking to Scott Bessent, who is a top economic advisor to President Donald Trump. He's also CEO and founder of Key Square Capital Management. He has been out on the road with the president, supplying economic advice and helping the campaign that won the historic victory that we saw last Tuesday. We're honored to have him. In 1988, the first time that I spoke to President Donald Trump about seeking the presidency, although he was skeptical that the time was right for him and for his ideas, we took this exploratory trip to New Hampshire. He spoke to the Portsmouth, New Hampshire Chamber of Commerce. I had arranged for that. It's the first time I ever saw the Trump electricity in a political context. There were more people who showed up to watch the black helicopter land with Trump on the side than had been at the luncheon for Vice President George Bush the month before. I think there were 1,500 people. And he spoke in that speech about the unfair trading relationships that he had. I remember him saying, when it comes to trading, they send killers to negotiate and we send social workers. How do we go back to addressing our trading relationships to deal with those countries who are manipulating our currency and taking advantage of us in our trading relationships?
Yeah, well, Roger, as you noted, President Trump has indicated that we are going to reorder our trading relationships. They are not working for the American people. Since 1991, the U.S. has gone into large deficits in our trading accounts with our counterparties. Some of them have accumulated huge surpluses, which, as an economist, tells me that there is a gigantic imbalance. And those imbalances are due to unfair trading practices. And Roger, I've been doing this for 35 years. I've met leaders from around the world, and Donald Trump is the most sophisticated politician, movement leader of a movement that I have met on economics and trade. He is bringing back tariffs as a negotiating tool and as a revenue tool, and the academic academy is out of their mind over it. And it's because President Trump has such an open mind and wants to, he realizes that it's not, the system hasn't been working for the American people, and we're going to fix it. But at the end of the day, I remember when he was leaving the G7 meeting in Ottawa to go to North Korea, that he told all the participants there, if you drop all your tariffs, I'll drop mine. So at the end of the day, he wants free trade, but we haven't had fair trade, we haven't had reciprocal trade, and it hasn't worked for working class Americans.
No, I think that's exactly right. At heart, he's actually a free trader, but he recognizes that our trading partners don't allow us free trade. So he's used tariffs as a club to get them to play fair with the United States. I was intrigued when he threw out the idea, just as a concept, of doing away with the income tax entirely. Until 1917, although it was first proposed in 1913, until 1917, we had no federal income tax. We existed solely on the revenues from tariffs. Is that actually feasible?
Roger, I think a hybrid system will be the best system, and a group of us are going to be spending our time over the next couple of weeks figuring out what part of the income tax system can be replaced with tariffs, because tariffs are a very interesting economic beast that make it easy on me. If we say, okay, we're going to put a 10% tariff on all of our foreign trade, well, the currency goes up traditionally about 4%. Then there are elasticities, their preferences, and the foreign manufacturers may lower their prices. Factories may get moved to other countries, or better yet, the factories may come back to the U.S. So this talking point that the Harris campaign had saying, oh, it's a 10% tax on Americans, it's not. A tariff is a very fluid and dynamic form of taxation. So I think over the coming weeks and months, we're going to be examining what's the optimal mix of tariffs, individual income taxes, corporate taxes. But again, it's because Donald Trump had such an open mind, he wasn't clinging to the traditional dogma.
We got about 3 minutes here, and so a tough question, but I've written 2 books on Richard Nixon. I acknowledge that closing the gold window, which he did at the behest of Secretary of the Treasury John Connally, along with the wage and price controls, were among his greatest mistakes. What is the role that gold plays in America's economic future?
Well, Roger, I think that I've been a big bull on gold for the past 3 years, and what we're seeing is good and bad. We have under a lot of many of the previous administrations, this out of control spending, overuse of sanctions. I believe in sanctions, but they should be muscular and targeted. A lot of countries have been leaving the U.S. dollar and moving into gold. China's been accumulating gold. I read the other day that Poland wants to have 20% of their reserves in gold. The U.S. still has a very large amount of gold, and interestingly, we still carry it on at the 1971 price. But leaving the Bretton Woods gold standard accord is what has allowed this massive government spending, and gold was the check on that. And I think we've got to get the spending and these deficits back in control. And as Steve Forbes says, you look at the price of gold, and the U.S. dollar has devalued quite a bit.
All right. We're going to have to leave it there. I appreciate your joining us, Scott Bessent, the top economic advisor to President Donald Trump, according to the Associated Press and Reuters, a top contender to be Treasury Secretary of the United States. A brilliant man. I appreciate your joining us today with your time. Scott, I wish you the very best. And, well, just as a personal preference, I hope the president chooses you as his Treasury Secretary. God bless you, and thank you for joining us.
Roger, you're a great American. Good being with you.
Joining us now again is Scott Bessent. He is one of President Donald Trump's top economic advisors. Scott is the CEO and founder of Key Square Capital Management, known by some as the whale of Wall Street. In 1992, he helped the Quantum Fund make $1 billion shorting the British pound. He was also dubbed as the man who broke the Bank of Japan by the Wall Street Journal, making approximately $3.5 billion on the Abenomics trade from 2012 to 2015. He actually is accredited with restructuring the entire country's debt. In 2016, he has emerged as a key advisor to President-elect Donald Trump, and we are delighted to have him back on the show. Scott, tell us a little bit about yourself personally, where you're from, and the path you followed to get to where you are today.
Roger, it's a pleasure to be on. I'm from Little River, South Carolina. When I was growing up, it's a fishing village, unincorporated fishing village in South Carolina, where my family has been since about 1670. And I grew up with my cousins and pretty simple life. I was fortunate enough to go to Yale and stayed up in the Northeast, worked in London, in New York. And then in 2020, I decided to come back to South Carolina, moved about 100 miles away to Charleston. And all my friends say, well, you have passport stamps from 58 countries, but you ended up 100 miles from where you were born.
That's quite a life story. What an amazing day on Tuesday. You got to travel with the president in his final weeks on the campaign. I spoke to him. He raised your name when I saw him at Mar-a-Lago for dinner Friday night, and I share his exceedingly high regard for you. Now, some folks have pointed to the fact that in your business record, in your past, you worked for George Soros, and some of those folks don't recognize that you are among the most loyal Trump supporters and believers. But I thought I'd give you an opportunity to address your critics who point to your work for Soros.
Roger, thanks for asking that question. I point out a couple of things. Soros Fund Management was kept very separate from the Soros foundations. And many investment firms have, they're Democrats and Republicans. I haven't spoken to Mr. Soros since 2016. When I arrived at the firm in 1988, the Soros Foundation, which has thousands of people now, it was 2 Hungarians and 3 Russians, and all they were doing was sneaking fax machines behind the Iron Curtain to help bring the Iron Curtain down. And then George got involved with U.S. politics around 2004, and I can't explain his point of view, but what I can say is that those who have seen the other side, I always find the most adamant anti-communist are those from communist countries. So, I've seen how the other side works. I am 100% dedicated. I've been using my resources to push back against him in school board races, in district attorney races, and obviously President Trump, for me, has just been this fantastic leader, as you said, of a movement, and is the most important political figure of this century. And I've had the pleasure of knowing the Trump family for 30 years. I was very good friends with the president's brother, Robert, who passed away when he was in office. And about in May of 2023, when everyone on Wall Street thought that Donald Trump didn't have a chance, I was watching this pattern. And the pattern was, the more this lawfare happened to President Trump, the higher he went in the polls and the more money he raised. And in Wall Street, that's called going up on bad news. So when a company reports bad earnings or something bad happens, but the stock goes up, there's something going on there that the market's not recognizing. So I was all in for President Trump. I was one of the few Wall Street people, backing him. But to get back to Soros Fund, I was never on board with Mr. Soros' policies. I worked at the fund management company, and funnily enough, two of the other CIOs, Stan Druckenmiller, who's a very large Republican donor, a bit more traditional, and then followed by Bob Bishop, who I think you probably know from Mar-a-Lago, is a real great supporter of President Trump. So, there have been three CIOs who have departed ways with Mr. Soros on policy.
Well, we've spent enough time on that. My friend Larry Kudlow, for whom I have enormous respect and affection, really the quarterback of Donald Trump's plan to revitalize America's economy in his first term, thinks very highly of you, thinks you ought to be Secretary of the Treasury. The Associated Press and Reuters both report that you are on the short list for that job. Well, and if Larry Kudlow loves you, that's good enough for me. You're the guy who coined the phrase Trump trade months ago. What were you talking about?
Well, what I was talking about was the market kept going up every time President Trump went higher in the polls. And it occurred to me that what was really happening was even back in February, March, April, as he got stronger and stronger in the polls, the market was focusing on November 5th with extending the Trump tax cuts, energy dominance, deregulation, and calming down the international situation. The stock market picks up trends usually before traders do, and I've been doing this a long time. I'm pretty good at figuring out the mind of the market. And we saw on Wednesday, after the red sweep, it was the best day in the stock market in a year. The U.S. dollar had its biggest strengthened the most in 2 years, and the Russell index, which is the small cap index, the ETF for that index had the biggest inflows in 17 years because the stock market knows what President Trump is going to do. And back to our mutual friend Larry Kudlow, that I am in 100% agreement with Larry that we have to grow our way out of these problems. And we are going to unshackle the U.S. and it's going to be a private sector solution. And Roger, I can tell you that being in Donald Trump's cabinet, anyone who's in it, it's an easy job because your job isn't to come up with new policies. Your job is to do what Donald Trump wants you to do. You are given marching orders, and everyone is going to figure out the most effective way to implement his policies, because these are his policies. I had the privilege of meeting with Margaret Thatcher more than 20 times. I've met with world leaders, and none of them are focused on the economy the way Donald Trump is.
Well, when Mr. Blackwell died, I took on the task of publishing an international best and dressed worst list, which I have now done for 15 years straight. Larry Kudlow was on the list so many years that I had to move him to emeritus status, so he's on the list now every year. I just wanted to point that out. You have talked about a comprehensive regulatory roadmap for promoting bank lending. The thing I hear, whether it's from people trying to buy a home or people trying to start a business, big firms, small firms, they all say the same thing, that it's extremely difficult to get capital. It's hard to borrow money. How do we fix that?
Well, we've got to unleash the banking sector. And what happened in 2008, after it always happens with bank regulation or financial regulation, they close the barn door after all the horses or cows are out, and they may put in these onerous capital requirements. Silicon Valley Bank went under a few years ago, and that was a supervisory failure. It wasn't a failure of the regulations, but the regulators can't admit that it was their problem, so they want to put on more regulations. So, I think that the 5 agency heads for the economic agencies or the financial service agencies on January 20th will be asked to submit their resignations, and we will start a program of revitalizing bank lending in the United States. That I have a farming business up in North Dakota, and I can tell you that the community banks up there are the lifeblood for the farming community. And the bankers, the local and community banks, they know their customers. Their children play Little League Baseball together. They go to their schools. And the great thing about the U.S. is the broadness of our financial system. But what has happened since the great financial crisis in 2005, the 5 largest banks held 22% of the assets. Now they hold 50%. And we've got to make sure that for average people, that the community banks and the small banks are there for them.
We have about 2 minutes before we have to go to a commercial break. You started talking about America entering a new golden age under Donald Trump. I like the line so much that I've stolen it. I used it in my interview with Piers Morgan this past week. But what did you mean when you said it? Well,
and to the extent that when someone takes it, it's a sincerest form of flattery. Actually, Saturday Night Live used it on Saturday. I don't watch the show, but somebody sent it to me. They used the new golden age, in their weekend update section. So it's catching on. But we've had this great stock market thanks to President Trump, and now I think there is a chance to unshackle the U.S. economy. I think we don't realize how damaging all these pages and pages of regulations that the Biden administration put on and the costs that are associated with that. So I think when we bring down these regulations, when we reassert U.S. energy dominance, as President Trump calls it, we got liquid gold. And I think we're going to build out the energy infrastructure in America. And that growth will allow us to tackle the budget deficit, and inflation will come down, which means interest rates will come down. So I can see this great self-fulfilling circle where we just go from strength to strength. And we are the envy of the world. All the capital in the world wants to come here. We've seen these technology leaders. You couldn't imagine Silicon Valley going for Donald Trump in 2016 or 2020, but they were so put off by what Biden and Harris were doing that we've got Elon Musk, we've got Mark Andreessen, And, so I just think we could have this period of innovation, low inflation, great growth, and then start getting our fiscal house in order.
All right, folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Scott Bessent, who identified by the Associated Press and Reuters as a leading candidate for Secretary of the Treasury in the Trump administration. Don't touch that dial, because we'll be right back with this fascinating discussion.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
All right, folks, we're back on the Roger Stone Show. We're talking to Scott Bessent, who is a economic advisor to President-elect Donald Trump. He had the opportunity to ride the plane for the final couple weeks of the campaign. He was right there in the thick of the action. President Trump himself told me last Friday night of his high regard for our guest, and I share that high regard, just having an opportunity to get to know him over the last couple of days and read an enormous amount about him. Scott, here's a question. China is seen as an existential threat to the United States. Do you agree with that characterization, and what do we do to check China, particularly economically, in the next administration?
Well, I told President Trump when I came in about 10 or 12 months ago to see him that thus far his greatest achievement was waking the U.S. up to the threat of China and to the unfair trade practices. They've been expanding their military like crazy, and they've been trying to become the export leader in the world, but they do it through unfair trade practices. They suppress their currency, they suppress wages, and they keep U.S. companies out of the market. So, Roger, there are really two things here. There is China, the security threat, and President Trump has a fantastic relationship based on mutual respect with Xi Jinping. So I think that he will easily handle the security aspect. I was with him in a private meeting the other day, and a journalist said, well, what are you going to do about the Taiwan situation? And he said, he's not going to invade Taiwan under me. And if he does, I'll put a 200% tariff on him, and he knows that I'll crash his economy. So there's that Donald Trump using tariffs as deterrence, which no one else had thought to do. It's really unique, and it's a great strategy. On the other side, we do want to engage with China if they are willing to have fair and reciprocal trade. And we need to bring back critical U.S. industries. We realized we had a test run during COVID when we realized, excuse me, that so many of the key ingredients in our pharmaceuticals come from China. So many of the what are called rare earths, which go into high alloys. I'll tell you an interesting story. One of the brightest people who ever worked for me, this woman actually predicted the pandemic. She had been reading a lot. She thought, well, the world's setting itself up for a pandemic. And she went and started a mask company, but then it turned out 60% of the supplies for the mask came from China, so she wasn't able to access them. So I think it's three pieces there. There's the military security piece. Let's get free and fair trade and set up a reasonable relationship with China, and let's secure our supply chains and make sure that we never have what could have happened during COVID happen again.
Some of our adversaries produce some of the most valuable resources, uranium, the lithium, other things we need for batteries. How do we help the U.S. grow our own energy dominance, beyond oil and gas?
Well, first of all, Roger, rare earths are not rare. The U.S., we've got plenty of rare earths here. It's a permitting problem. And I think once the Department of Energy, the Department of Interior, once they fix the permitting problem, then, I think we will go back to mining and producing these things ourselves. I think that this year or in the past year, China has bet. Everyone says, "Oh, China's solar and they're green." Well, that's the big lie. They built 100 coal plants last year, but more importantly, they built 10 nuclear plants. And nuclear is the wave of the future for the U.S. Our northern neighbor and our closest ally, Canada, has plenty of uranium. And I think we have got to start permitting and building the nuclear plants again, which are going to drive the AI data wave that we're going, or the AI wave that we're going through. And I tell you, this AI wave could be as big as the second industrial revolution in 1890. President Trump likes to talk about President McKinley and how great the country did under him, with tariffs. But the other thing that drove the country then was just the expansion of the industrial base through the railroads. So this AI build out, we've got to think of a way to power the electricity without making electricity prices go up for consumers. And, I think it'll be energy. I think the bridge fuel will be nat gas. And we've got plenty of nat gas. We've just got to get the permitting done and the energy infrastructure built out.
Now, some argue that halting the illegal immigration into our country could have adverse effects on our economy. These views seem strange to me. Can you debunk that notion, explain why it's critical, actually, for our economic and national security?
Well, a couple of things. Those who say that the GDP will go or it'll be inflationary if we follow through on the deportation that President Trump's talking about. I would just point out that we didn't let in, but Biden and Harris let in between 10 and 20 million people, and we had the worst inflation in 40 years. So, that doesn't really resonate with me. And it's a national security issue, and having more people in the country makes GDP go up. But what we care about is GDP per capita per American citizen. And I will tell you that the reason President Trump, and he's the only one who could have done it, he assembled a multiracial working class party and then complemented that with some of the greatest entrepreneurs in the world and then patriots. And that's the new Republican Party. And the working Americans, I can tell you that President Trump is committed to it. I am committed to it because at a point in my life, my family had financial hardship. I've known financial anxiety. And I do not want that for any family. But I'll call it an invasion that happened at the border, that this has suppressed the wages of the bottom 25 or 50% of wage earners, and that's going to stop. So their wages will go up, not down. And the top 10% under Biden and Harris did great. The bottom 50% saw real losses in purchasing power and affordability crisis, and they came out and exercised their right to vote at the ballot box and put President Trump, he got the popular vote because of them.
Now, you've been very bullish on gold for the past several years. This show is actually sponsored by the Colonial Metals Group, with the folks I like when it comes to diversifying your retirement nest egg with precious metals like gold and silver. Are you still bullish on gold? And then beyond that, what do you think of cryptocurrencies?
Sure. So I'm still bullish on gold. One thing that may slow down the rise of gold a little is that with President Trump's back, we are committed to getting this budget deficit under control, because gold is the ultimate hedge against the spending or overspending prolific countries. But all the other countries are still doing it. They know that their currencies are being devalued. So what you're seeing is major central banks around the world, ex the U.S., I think they're going to continue accumulating gold, and there's going to be a constant bid there for gold. So I am quite bullish. I think the price rise will be more measured because we're going to get our U.S. fiscal house in order.
All right, there you have it. Scott Bessent, economic advisor to President-elect Donald Trump, a man who the Associated Press and Reuters both report is on the short list to be potentially Secretary of the U.S. Treasury under President Donald Trump, who will be the 47th President of the United States. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you, Roger.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it, a great interview with Roger Stone. If you haven't seen or heard, I should say, if you haven't heard the Roger Stone Show on WABC, you can go to WABCradio.com and check out. Just go to the tab with the Roger Stone Show, and you can go back and listen. Even President Donald Trump, I believe he was the first guest that Roger ever had on that WABC radio show. I've been a guest on the show. People like Kash Patel and many other, Tulsi Gabbard, so many other great patriots have been on that radio show. So very interesting show. And really in radio, you look around, there's not many people. Roger puts on a hell of a show, pretty much the best in the business. So go ahead and check that out. I want to play a clip here, folks. There are a few things that are constant: death, taxes, and Joe Biden making an ass out of himself in public. Yesterday, he was seen at his beach house in Delaware, stumbling around, struggling to walk. I mean, truth be told, I've been reporting on Biden for 4 years now, and he's the easiest clicks in the world. I mean, the guy is he's gold. He's comic gold. So let's roll President Biden really stumbling on the beach, struggling to walk here, and just ask the question: where are the people asking questions about his health? Is this the guy with the nuclear codes? They really want us to believe that this guy's in charge? I mean, give me a break. Let's roll that.
He's playing? Yeah. He's playing. He's trying too hard. Huh. He's playing.
Mr. President!
Mr. President, just a word.
Mr. President, what are you going to say to Trump on Wednesday?
Whoa.
Mr. President, what are you going to talk with Trump on Wednesday?
I mean, it's just unbelievable. How do they let this guy? I mean, his family, obviously, it's like the idea that they would just string this out, they continue to put him out there in the spotlight. They just don't care about him, and it's awful to watch. I mean, he just looks helpless, and it's pretty sad. But every once in a while, he does flash the old Joe Biden, and we see the rough side of him, and we saw that in the White House today. He threatened a reporter and threatened to hit her over the head with a camera. Pretty unbelievable stuff. Let's roll that from the Oval Office.
President Biden, do you think that you can get a hostage deal by the end of your term?
I think you can hit the head by a camera behind you. All right. Thank you all. Mr. President.
He is the best. I mean, he really doesn't care at this point, folks, and I think it's hilarious that he appears to have sabotaged Kamala Harris, and there's nobody that's rolling their eyes more right now than Kamala Harris when it comes to this. We have one other short clip I want to play, and this is Oprah Winfrey. Now, it has come out now how much the Kamala Harris campaign was spending. Now, keep in mind, they raised $1 billion total. They reportedly gave $5 million to rapper Megan Thee Stallion declined to appear in an Atlanta rally. They also reportedly paid Oprah Winfrey $1 million. Now, Oprah's denying this, and she was confronted over the 2024 election results after campaigning for Kamala Harris, and after reports surfaced that she had received $1 million for campaigning for the Harris campaign. So let's roll the clip of Oprah snapping at a reporter and denying that she was paid any money to campaign for Kamala Harris.
Hey Oprah, good morning. How are you, darling? You're looking very good. How do you think the election went?
Not talking about the election, thank you very much.
Oh, is it true that they paid you $1 million for the endorsement for Kamala?
Not true.
Not true, okay.
I was paid nothing, ever.
What do you think about all the celebrities with their mass exodus?
I'm not talking about
Do you think Prince Harry's gonna lose his visa now that Trump's president? Thank you, Oprah.
Well, there you have it, folks. I mean, look, the Hollywood people, they came out for Kamala Harris, and we're finding out why now. And Oprah, you know, she is somebody who, when she interviewed President Trump back in the 1980s, you know, she was very friendly with him. And when President Trump was a businessman with billions of dollars, she was the biggest fan he ever had. And he would go on her show and she would kiss his ass. And now that he is a Republican, Oprah Winfrey campaigns against him and hates him. And I think that shows, you know, Oprah's character, her integrity is about as thin as a human hair. And she really has no backbone. She has no spine. There's nothing that she really believes in other than money. And, you know, that's well and good. That's fair. But don't tell us that you're some kind of moral warrior. Don't tell us that you're out there on the front line standing up for people when you, Oprah Winfrey, have contributed to a lot of racial stereotypes. There's a guy that was on the TV show Blackish. His name is Anthony Anderson. I beg you, look this guy up. He's been kicked off of like 10 different sets for sexually assaulting people. Yet every OWN commercial, every company's got him as a spokesperson. And Oprah Winfrey puts this guy up. She's friends with Harvey Weinstein. She's friends with all these people. Are you kidding me? P. Diddy? I mean, how long has Oprah Winfrey known about Harvey Weinstein? How long has she known about P. Diddy? How long did she know that these Hollywood elites were doing this stuff? And is she a part of it? We have to be honest in asking questions. And Oprah Winfrey, there needs to be an investigation into did she receive money or not? The FEC filing should spell that out, so we'll have answers for you on that tomorrow, folks. But my name's Troy Smith. Really enjoyed being with you today. Roger obviously couldn't be with us in the second half, but he'll be back tomorrow. And we will have more breaking news then as this Trump administration continues to get filled out. So go to mypillow.com, use promo code STONE at the checkout to make sure you get your products and you help us keep the lights on here at the Stone Zone. Give us a follow at rumble.com/Roger Stone. Download the Rumble app. I will be with you tomorrow again, and have a beautiful evening, folks. God bless. Good night.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?